Got Fletcher and James here as well. Say hi.
Hello.
Awesome. Today's a fun one. If you haven't caught LinkedIn Live yet, we just kind of pop on every week and build in public. Sometimes we get in the weeds and show off some really cool features of our product. Sometimes we keep the conversation pretty high level and big picture about the future of work and everything in between. And today's an interesting conversation. I think it's going to be relevant for a lot of people who either tune in now or catch up afterwards. Because we're going to be talking about AI in a very practical way. I think a lot of the conversation that we've had or we've seen online has been either like really esoteric, about the destiny of mankind, or it's been a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing in my feeds are just like people playing around with Midjourney or ChatGPT, a lot of text and graphics, and that stuff's really great, and we can definitely talk about that today. But I wanted to invite Fletcher to really kind of paint a picture of the current landscape of AI, and what it means. Eventually we'll kind of get into a good conversation about what it means to actually like leverage it to build product, not just like to answer a quick question on ChatGPT or something. So, any other context you want to give before we dive in, Fletcher?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously it's a emerging thing. We're all learning about it as fast as we possibly can. This will be fun to look back in 2 years and rewatch this and roll our eyes at ourselves. But it's just where we are, and it's good to just like keep having the conversations and um, just be a participant, right? Not just sit back and in fear or not understanding it. Like we're really on the edge of. I mean, I know in real estate, you look at places that grew and populated, and you're like, "Gosh, I wish I was there 10 years ago, and I could have bought a house there." Right? Well, technology is the same way, right? Like, oh man, I wish I was right at the beginning of the internet, and I was a part of that .com before it burst, and all that stuff. Like, AI is absolutely one of those things that is is going to be and currently is such a massive part of our conversation. And so, just be a part of it. Even if it's a mess or you don't understand it, and that's I guess I'll lead by example today.
Amazing. So James and I can just ask really dumb questions on behalf of
Please.
ourselves and others. Okay,
And
cool.
I'll be honest, I'll let you know when I don't know. And again, I'm new to it all, so it's I've been like 6 months ingrained into it, but just have a bit of a different perspective as I've actually had to bring it into a product and so understand its limitations and actually start using it versus just reading about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so it'll be a pretty simple overview just to give you a quick overview or agenda what we're going to do. I just want to talk quickly about what it even is, just give a basics of how I understand it, an analogy that even helps me with that, and then look at its current uses in business, and then look at issues that it's like that's arised right now. Obviously, this will be solved as time goes on, but just current issues. And then I even have some predictions of for digital products of how I think it'll be implemented. And again, that'll be the fun part to look at in 2 years or probably 2 months and roll our eyes at it. But either way, it's a fun discussion to have. So real quick, just talking about AI and what it is. A lot of people, it just feels like a mystery. There's a lot of talk about like it being like how's it being trained, and we need to give it like better data or ethical data so that it doesn't make kind of wrong outputs and stuff like that. One thing that really helped me understand and kind of, I don't know, I guess make me realize how large it really is well, first looking at there's really two things with AI. There is an LLM, which is the large language model, and that's basically like the ocean. Just think of it as like an ocean. It's all of the data that can be used to build and train GPTs. We'll get to that in a second. So it's like effectively it's all of our knowledge. Obviously it's still kind of small, but it's all of the knowledge. It's like what it can learn from, and they don't actually disclose it, but it's thought to be that the LLM that we are training GPT 3.5 or even 4.0 on are as big as possibly 1 petabyte of data. So and what's so I actually looked up. I was like, okay, how much is a petabyte? Because it's easy to say that, but what does that really mean? But basically, it would take 1 billion, well, actually 1.07 billion books to hold a petabyte of data, which is wild. That's
Oh, dang.
so. If you were to put it into like a library, it's 91 Empire State Buildings worth of books, which is crazy, right? Like that is a ton and ton of data. Um, what I find fascinating about that is people talk about like, oh, we need to be feeding, we need to be giving it like good, clean data at the beginning or ethical kind of data that it's going to base its stuff off of. But just note like, or even they'll highlight like a lot of trials that go, it's like, oh, this one artist feels like he's getting ripped off, but like you are your data that you put into the world is one goldfish in an ocean of data. Like it's so small. It takes so much to manipulate, uh, you know, this LLM. It's really a reflection of our human like knowledge. You know, it really is.
Yeah, it's
That's a
like the
ton of
digital
data.
collective consciousness, whatever
Yeah,
we've been able to do, like, to generate digitally, that's just
exactly. So that's interesting, right? So that's a lot of data. However, to compare it, because we're like, oh, it's like humans, that's so much data. No one could know that much information. Like, could you know 91 Empire State Buildings worth of books? Well, actually, our brains hold around an average of 2.5 terabytes of data. So it's actually like 2.5 times the size, or petabytes, sorry, of data. So it's just your brain alone can fathom 2.5 times that size, right? So really, it still has a long ways to go. And also, by the way, when you think and actually operate, you are referencing all of that data. Now, we actually reference that data through a GPT that's been trained on that data, and that's much smaller. That's like 55 times smaller, basically, when a GPT comes out. So anyway, does that kind of, and so a
yeah.
GPT basically is trained on this massive ocean of data and then has kind of a predictable outcome of how it's going to work. You can think of the GPT as like one of the species, right, of fish in the ocean, right? It's well known, it's distinctive, has certain unique characteristics. And it's nice because it might understand things holistically. Like it needs to know how to fish and or eat and and make a home and stuff like that. It knows like kind of how to live, but it only represents a really small part of the whole vast ocean. And so when you get in conversations with people, or if you even look right now on OpenAI, they have different versions of GPT you can use. You can use 3.5 or 4.0. If you look at Gemini, they have a ton. They have a GPT, I think they call it GPT Garden, and you can pick all these different GPTs. And you'd think, I mean, the way we're wired with hardware and software is that you just look for the highest number, right? The best one, the latest one must be the best. That's not always true, though, actually. Sometimes a starfish gets the job done better than a shark can, even though it's dumber than the shark. And so it's actually about learning like what do you need the outcome of the project you're working on to do, and which GPT is best trained to give you a predictable output. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Didn't know
totally.
that.
So yeah, so then when we look at like what is a GPT, obviously we use it widely, and it's mostly known for its text output. It does do images now, and it's starting to do video and stuff like that. But I'd like to just talk about it as text, because I also think text at the moment is the most useful, and we can get into it later. But it feels the most it feels the least invasive because it doesn't have to make a bunch of assumptions. Like there's so many more assumptions when you have to like draw something. But text can kind of give you guidance or kind of give you art direction, but still allows you to take that and participate in it. But basically, the GPT is a trained model, right? Generative pre-trained transformer is what the GPT stands for, and is pre-trained on the data in some way. So it's kind of now a well-known, kind of distinct, and has unique characteristics about it. And it basically predicts words in a sentence. It's really interesting, actually. If you dive into it, it's you'll also look that like they usually charge a GPT based on tokens, and that's like text in and text out. Basically, it takes all your words, actually takes all the words in its GPT, turns them into tokens. So the word hi or hello is like 1542 or something, right? And then world is 6721. So it takes your word, turns into this string, and then puts it into this GPT, and basically it predicts what kind of answer a human would give. So I really it's hard to express that if you have a pretty set way of how computers work, where it is programmed to receive a very specific type of input and then give you an output. I know a lot of people the first time, and for me even the first time I used like Midjourney or something, I wonder where it's copying this information from, right? And usually we think that when someone's output is better than our assumed input, that person. Like if you have a kid that's like 3 years old and they draw an amazing ocean picture, and it's like too good for what you know they know, you ask them, where did you copy that from? Right? That's what you say. And so in general, I think when people are using GPT and at first, they have a knowledge of how a computer works like a child. And they're like, I wonder where it copied this information from. But that's just a complete that's just a fallacy. That's not how it's actually working. It actually learns kind of the same way we do. It sort of understands generally what an ocean should look like, and then when an artist actually draws something, they're not copying an image in their head or some picture that they saw. They're just like they know what an ocean looks like when it's compared to this. They sort of draw it organically based on all the input they have. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that's why it feels so much more human, because it's actually doing it's learning and kind of like creating something new and original. And it's interesting too. I mean, I don't even know how they're going. I actually should research like some of the lawsuits and stuff like that of artists that feel like it's stealing from them. It's actually very similar to just normal court cases. I know like Taylor Swift got sued by some moron who thought, she stole some like little phrase from him. It's actually going to be a similar kind of court case. It's like, well, they took it as input. We have a lot of input, right? They say there's nothing new under the sun. Like everything I do is some like some GPT of my LLM in my head, right? It's some sort of output and conglomeration of a lot of stuff I learned. Maybe it heavily relies on some things better than others, but it's all an output of my learned knowledge. So, I'll pause there for a second. Does that make sense so far?
It does make sense. Yeah, because I think a lot of the well, I live in a world of creatives, right? Because we've been in the creative work for a long time, working with freelancers and stuff. And I think a lot of people who are anti AI or afraid of it or pissed off about it are referring to exactly what you just brought up, like the copycat idea. So that's really interesting. I really haven't heard a ton of point of view around that. So I'm glad that you bring that up, and it's something that I am now more curious about.
Yeah,
It,
absolutely.
you feel like so I guess it's okay if you don't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering like if someone's like, "Hey, look, no, this image is like ripping off my
Hmm.
image." Do you think that happened? Would you say that's more likely to happen as pure accident, or actually as, or maybe someone's like, here's a reference and make something like this, and actually a human is dictating to to the AI to actually make it like that person's. Do you know what I'm saying?
So so GPT works not just on its predicted kind of like how it's been trained, but it also looks for feedback as people are using it. So it it might have a predictive like way it outputs, but it's also getting confirmation from users as far as what our preference is. So as Midjourney is building designs and stuff like that, and you'll see this. These are called trends. Without GPT, these are called trends. Oh, look, a lot of
Yeah,
people are doing skeuomorphism. A lot of people are doing minimalist design. Are they copying each other, or are they just listening to the feedback of us and knowing, oh, people enjoy this style, I'll give them more of that.
yeah,
So when you hold up something and say, oh, it stole it, it's nice because GPT doesn't have a voice in the room and you can't like see it. So it feels like a machine has stole it, because that's how we understand everything on a computer to be. It's copy and paste, right? Or it's pre-programmed. But it's just not the case. It's
yeah,
actually learning our preferences, it's learning the current trends, and it's going to be delivering you more and more images that reflect our current trends, because that's where it gets the best positive feedback.
yep, that makes sense. Hey, Josiah.
Awesome. So, okay, a few things. One, even though GPT 3.5, its text output was indistinguishable from humans. That's what they said. That was kind of its big landmark thing. That's not the same as it passing the Turing test. The Turing test is basically where a human and a machine are indistinguishable. And so I think that's really important too. I think people think when they read that stat, like, oh, you can't tell the difference between its writing and the human's writing. Oh, it's sentient, it knows it's like it's a person, but that's not fully accurate. The Turing test is something much more complex, and there's things that'll take a while for it to get there. Just so we know kind of what kind of hurdles it needs to pass. It doesn't have a deep understanding, right? Sometimes its response lacks some of the depth, or even insight that a genuine human experience can have, right? There's that. So if you were to get the response from two people or from a person and a machine, you can probably tell, right? They actually already building like GPT detectors so that like college students can't just like cheat all day. And these are some of the ways that they're doing that. So one is it lacks deep understanding. There is contextual limitations. It actually fails to kind of grasp subtle nuances, it or cultural references, or even like emotional cues. Those are all it doesn't yet have, right? It's not multimodal too. It's just relying on our text input. That's changing soon, and maybe you'll start to hear inflections. But in general, it lacks our contextual limitations. Also, like even long conversations. Right now, it's pretty cool in GPT. Um, and OpenAI's, you're having a long string of text. It's actually really interesting. Every time you hit return, it's taking your entire conversation and re-ingesting it, by the way. It's not just that next one. So it looks like it's having a conversation with you. It's contextually aware. But as that grows, or if you shift subjects, it can't follow you quite as well, and it starts to break down a little bit. So that's also another limitation. There are obviously some inconsistencies and errors, which there's like a label right at the bottom of GPT that it can make mistakes, right? And make sure you check it for important information. That's what's funny is that's also human. I mean, that's not different, but we expect our tools to operate really consistently. That's not a bad thing. I think we even hold ourselves to some standard like that. Like, hey, we need to really be careful to avoid mistakes. But when it comes to machines, they're the easiest thing to throw under the bus if something goes wrong, right? Because they can't stand in the court case and defend themselves. It's like, oh, it's not my fault. I copied it from there. So it's like it's easily becomes the lowest person on the totem pole, and so we need to. That's a really big issue that it still has errors. I think it's really interesting too, the way we as humans use technology that has errors. There is an interesting psychology behind it. Do you guys remember Kickstarter did a huge campaign? I think it was one of the most successful at the time, but it was called the Coin Card. Did either of you see or hear about that?
Sounds familiar.
So it was a card. It was super cool, and you loaded your cards onto it and had a tiny button on it. So it was the same size as a card. It wasn't any bigger, and you literally pushed a
Yeah.
button, and it would like load the next card. So you could put like 16 cards in one card. It was awesome. I bought two in the pre-starter. It was like 2 years till it was gonna be made, or $100 each, and I couldn't wait. And it finally came out, and I went to a store, and I used it the first time, and it's like there was an error because it didn't work with this one machine. So of course I had my backup card in my wallet, so I pulled that out and used that instead. So I've just been programmed that this one doesn't work all the time, but this one works all the time, and I have to bring both of them everywhere I go as a backup. I'll just always start with my
Why did I
normal
get this
card.
in the first place? Yeah.
Exactly. So actually it was horror. It failed like within 6 months because of that problem. I think it worked on 99% of use cases. This coin card did, but because it didn't work, 1% of the time, it failed to get adoption because you had to carry your backup with you anyway. So why rely on it at all? So I think that's a really interesting thing when it comes to GPT and with its errors is it's like, okay, if the work has to be done anyway, why don't we just go with the one we know is going to be truthful, or at least be able to be present in a court case, you know? And so anyway, but we know because of its efficiencies and how fast it works, it's definitely worth using at least as a first pass, and then build off of that. But
Mhm.
anyways, that's one thing that's limiting it to pass the Turing test. Another is its limited creativity and flexibility. So it's not spontaneous. It's not adaptively creative. Now it is creative, right? But think of it. You're just getting a regurgitation of a massive amount of data. I'm not saying it's not impressive. I'm just saying it's not new. It's not at the moment creating new trends. It's not inventing new things yet. Again, and that's not. I think that's something it could possibly do, but some of that real nuance kind of edge case or real like metaphorical thinking that kind of brings us a lot of the creativity you have today doesn't yet exist in it because it's giving us a favored sort of outcome that everyone has agreed on they like.
Yeah. It's like the difference between creativity and creation, right? There's like
Yeah,
a lowercase c,
absolutely.
uppercase C. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Mm.
I love that. And it's not going to take risks as much or as willing as some humans are programmed to be, right? It's going to try to in order to limit its fail, which is a bigger issue, it actually being incorrect, it's going to limit its risk. So it's not going to be willing to like, okay, this might be crazy, but blah, 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 right? It's going to do that less because it doesn't want to be inaccurate. So anyway, that's one issue. And then finally is one ethical and safety constraints. I think this is really interesting. Everyone is like quick to jump on the bandwagon of like, it needs to be ethical. It needs to have safety constraints. And I'm one of them. I totally agree. However, that immediately makes them appear overly cautious and restricted, right, compared to a human. So a human might be able to kind of like separate, the bone from marrow on a topic and be like, actually, this is a really interesting thread here that's sort of, I'm walking into a minefield, but I'm careful not to step on the mines. Whereas AI is going to avoid the minefield completely. And so because of that, we instantly think, oh, it's overly cautious, so it's not a human. So that's why it doesn't pass these Turing tests. But does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Fletcher, you mentioned at one point, you said multimodal.
Yeah.
And that's something we're probably going to see more of in the future, and that term in multiple places, right? Like, would you expand on that more?
Yeah, sure. So the way I understand it, obviously GPT is text input, text output. It's starting to do text input and then can give you an image. You can do stuff like that. So it's, but its input is always going to be something similar, and or even with like text based. And again, this is just my understanding of it. You could take an image and it could do a query on it, but turn it into like text or whatever. So basically, like text is the input. Multimodal allows you to like have it take anything input. So it can be an image or a sound, or like words or text, or I don't know, anything. Like this multimodal basically uses different kind of how I understand it, different tokening systems to basically assign whatever the input that came in on it. So Gemini is one, I think the first.
Yeah, that was
I
the
think there's
best
others, but
demo
anyway,
of what this is. Yeah.
yeah, it is multimodal. So you can be talking to it and showing it stuff. So if it was a part of this conversation, it would know what I'm wearing, and it could probably know that it's probably cold here because I'm wearing a sweater, and it kind of understands what I'm saying, and it can start to infer things from two types of input, right? From its eyes and from its ears, essentially. And then if I'm writing anything, it would do the same. So anyway, that's my understanding of what multimodal is. And it's exciting. That's cool, but there's more room for error or confusion between the two. But it's really interesting to watch Gemini work and kind of see how it could start to be a part of a conversation. I definitely think it'll start to be invited to more and more of our online meetings. And just kind of be a participant in the room and be able to provide feedback, take notes for you, help you remember the people that were in the room and like know their history and stuff like that. It'll be able to do a lot of that stuff, and you won't have to input the text. It'll just kind of know by seeing.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so excited for that. I'm like really freaking excited for that.
What does that look like in James's little world?
Oh, I mean,
You wake
like,
up and you're interacting with it. How?
yeah, it's like I love hopping on meetings and talking to people and then hopping off and hopping on to another. And it's like even me like taking notes during the meeting just kind of takes me out of sync, and so having this AI assistant always there, always on the call with us, that at the end's like, hey, you met with these 5 people today. Here was a general bullet points of the notes that were discussed. Do you need to email anyone? Like just to have that all the time is like a lifesaver. And I've seen what some of the technologies can do, but like, yeah, I'm once that is like fully integrated and it's in the apps we already use, I cannot wait.
Well, even beyond just like note taking and telling you what happened, like the ability to be like, I'm trying to think of like what we do after we get off a call with a client, right? So we're like, okay, what was their like? What'd you guys read on their face? Like, were they excited?
Oh, right,
How
totally.
do you feel that went? Is usually the first thing. How do you feel that went?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the ability to pull it into those kinds of nuances down the line and
yeah. I mean, that's what's like, it will eventually have the power to be like, hey, Joe on the call was acting a little anxious, like it'll be able to read. So it's like, well, it'll be able to do that, but do you think laws should be put in place for that not to be allowed? Because like that feels like a very personal human gift sometimes. Or do you think
for some humans, am I right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
But like, I'm just curious, like what if if we have that amount of information about other people all the time at our fingertips,
Oh,
is it
I know.
cool?
It's
Yeah, wild.
Yeah.
anyway, thank you for letting me derail a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah. So, and actually, we'll get into kind of its current uses in business, and there's so many, but I just kind of highlight a few. But before that, just to kind of look at the current landscape, there's OpenAI, which works with Microsoft, and so they're kind of both using. I don't quite understand their relationship, but I know they're trying to like work together to sort of build out their GPTs and stuff like that. So currently, if you're subscribed to GPT-4, which everyone absolutely should, that should like, I think there should be a penalty if you're not yet. It's $20 a month to be a part of the biggest change in our whole life. So if you're not yet, I want you to pause. I want you to go right now. I want you to pay $20 a month to get access to GPT-4 and see how it works and start communicating with it and using it in your kind of daily work life. And so anyway, GPT uses, you can actually do things. You can it uses Microsoft to get access to the internet. So if it needs to do things that aren't in its LLM, which needed a close date, right? They need to fill up the ocean of data and then train their GPTs on it. Okay, so there's a cap on when that LLM they stop putting data. And I think it was April of last year is when the GPT 4.0 LLM was created, and then GPT 4 was built from that. But if there's some new breakthrough or current trend that's happening that's after April, it can get access to that through Bing. So it actually uses some sort of API where basically the GPT takes your inquiry, and if there's some research that is part of it, it breaks out into a search. It figures out the best way to search for it. So it actually turns it into like a good search phrase. It goes and then looks on Bing, researches, gets back all the results, and picks a few of them to actually research. Then it goes into those sites. I don't yet know, and I'm trying to figure out how deep it researches those sites. If it just does a quick page crawl on the first one, or if it kind of walks through it a little bit more, I'll get back to you when I know. But it basically analyzes the data there, brings that all back in, and then continues its this GPT process of predictive text to figure out like how to take that information and compile it for you. Yeah, does that make sense? So that's OpenAI. That's GPT in relation with Microsoft. There's Google. They've been working on something called BERT and T5 and Gemini. I've only just recently began to use it and work with it. It's very, very fast, actually. And actually, that with a caveat, GPT 3.5 and 5, they've made a design choice to do that text crawling where it looks like it's being written. It makes the experience feel like you're talking to a human. It's actually the full answer's there before it starts writing, by the way, and all the formatting. So it's really interesting. It looks like it's typing. And for a while, I thought, oh, that's amazing. It's actually showing me its process. So it won. They totally figured out how to like trick me. But the truth is, the text is there. So Gemini does away with that. At least the ones I had participated in, and they're in the back end side. And the responses are super, super, super quick. So where GPT could take, I don't know, let's say 6 seconds average response, if I'm guessing, Gemini was under a second every time, no matter what the question was. So a lot faster. And that's important, but I don't think that's going to be a constraint for a while. And then Google is also, from my knowledge, the only one dabbling in multimodal. However, and I don't know if that's totally true, because now you can upload images or documents into GPT-4, and it'll analyze those as well. So it's kind of becoming a mix of what multimodal is there. And then Meta is also released. They had like Roberta and Bart. It's for social media and content understanding. I have not used those yet, so I can't compare them or give you any kind of apples to apples on those. But those are the main ones. There's ones by a few other companies. There's one in China and stuff like that. There's a bunch that are out there, but those are sort of the main players, or I guess the ones you're going to see headlines about at the moment.
Yeah.
Cool. So current uses in business. We could probably get lost here for a while, but obviously research is massive. Research, it accelerates research by like so much. There's actually one example is it analyzed 50,000 COVID-19 articles, and it was able to do that like so quickly. It was and like in a few months, it was able to also articulate and build out a bunch of articles about that research it did. So it's just like it's very, very quick. It can think. and just take in, so we all know this isn't like new, but it just takes in all this information. It's so useful for research. If you haven't used it for research yet, again, that's the first thing you need to do. It can be a silly thing that you've always wondered about, but you need to first subscribe to 4.0 GPT, $20 a month, and then do a little bit of research with it and like have it look things up and talk to it about, how does that work? Or look this thing up and let's talk about it and see how it can enhance your research. But that's really important. Have you guys both used it as a research tool?
Yes, all the
Cool.
time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. And that's something that's it could be done through an API too if we're looking at businesses. So that's something that doesn't even need like assistance, like where you're like talking to it live. It's actually research can be done where it just kind of takes a bunch of your input and like kind of provides for you some insights on it. But then there's the assistants, and that's what we're used to using. There's going to be a growth in the chat bot market like crazy. It's expected to reach $1.34 billion by the end of this year, or maybe already has. I mean, it's just growing so quickly. So that's how we're usually used to using it, and really like getting our feet wet in it. Review is another one. So content moderation, YouTube reviews over 80% of its content using AI. So it can actually like look at the contents of something and give it review or flag it for whatever, issues and stuff like that. So that's really nice as well. That's something that anyway, yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's really nice. Here's a cool way to work. If you are working on a project or any kind of thing, put it in there and ask it to respond to you and give it the persona of your client. So tell it about who your client is, or if you want to have like, what would a CEO think of this? What would a financial advisor think of this? What would and it'll actually tailor its response thinking about the the preferences that kind of persona has, and let you know and give you tweaks to make. So really awesome, and it's again, it's right there at our fingertips. So you can get the first time you hear feedback shouldn't be on a client call, by the way. Obviously that's just true across the board. You should at least use your team, but now before even a team, you can have AI weigh in on what decisions you're making, what your deck looks like, what your paper looks like, and let it review it and tell you like where it's strong, where it's weak, and that prepares you to either rewrite it or like work on it a little bit in those areas, or at the very least kind of know that going in. So review. And then
Yeah.
marketing and personalization. So this, sorry, Nicole, we're gonna say something.
No, I love that workflow. Because you can get in an echo chamber sometimes, if you're reviewing something internally. So I love the idea. It's not even just like ask AI generally. It's like give it a persona.
Yeah.
That is such a brilliant a tip.
Yeah, because everyone is different. Like, yeah, I mean, you can do something through the perspective of a revenue officer, and their feedback's gonna be so different than your creative officer, right? Both want success, okay? Everyone wants success. So just to say like, give me a general review, it's not gonna be as useful of information as like, tell me how this business idea works as a revenue officer. Okay, well, it struggles here. What about as a creative? Oh my gosh, that has so much potential. Like you're gonna get different kinds of feedback that is actionable if you tell it what kind of persona to have.
Yep.
So marketing. So a lot of us actually didn't realize it before GPTs were out and OpenAI, but basically a lot of personalized ads were AI driven, hyper personalized items. The Netflix the recommendations, that was all AI. Actually, there was an interesting backstory on that, but they actually they did a lot of really cool things. Netflix did really cutting edge kind of engineering methodologies. But one of them is they would hold these events where they let people try to figure out a better recommendation engine. And this was years and years and years ago, but they were basically they were at the forefront of using AI. Okay, here's the library of when someone watches this, they usually go here. Okay, so if you think about it, that's their LLM is all their data, and then these GPTs would figure out what the predictive outcome of watching this typically is, or based on these 5 inputs, like these 5 shows you watch, this is typically the output. So recommendations are AI driven typically, and if they're not, it's usually tag based and it's a disaster and not really useful and a lot of overhead to make that work anyway. So marketing and personalization. And then there's a few interesting ones like supply chain optimization, because forecasting errors and stuff like that, like how fast something's selling. There's just like so much data with supply chain, and so being able to like figure out where those at and highlight those before they're an issue or make changes there. Financial services, so AI in fintech, like fraud detection, um, like trading, algorithmic trading, um, personalized finance advice as well. Those are all expected to reach $22 billion by 2025. So obviously, I mean, there's money in money. So there's a lot of information there. So fintech services and then healthcare as well, right? So diagnostic and personalized treatment plans. I think that's a beautiful usage of it. Like I was even thinking about bedside manner, like these sometimes bad at talking doctors, giving really difficult information. I feel like there can be a bit of a moment there to take all the input and what's been learned and then like give it to someone better, give them a personalized plan that's based on that person's personality and like walk of life and stuff like that. Like that is something far too complicated for, a doctor to really expect to know how
Yeah.
to do. And I think that's gonna take off.
Oh my gosh, my obsession with personality types and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, the way you deliver the news to like
Yeah.
an Enneagram 8 versus like just for it to learn that stuff. Wow.
Yeah, it's very, very cool.
Mhm.
So next I just want to look at some of the issues in AI right now that need to be overcome. And anyway, just some of the opportunity I think in issues that we are actually trying to fix with job boards, by the way, as well. So, but one of them is really interesting. It's called the uncanny valley metaphor. Have either of you guys heard about that? The uncanny valley metaphor. Okay,
James says I haven't.
so it is such a fascinating idea. It is the study they did where they basically looked at the humans' trust. They measured like your trust hormones in your head, and they showed them pictures of a person's face that went from completely uncanny to an actual human face. So like a crayon drawing up to an actual person's face. Okay, so if you think about it in a chart, basically it starts low. There's low trust, or actually it goes. There's a negative too. Like you don't trust them, right? When it's a crayon drawing, and as the fidelity of the face grows, your trust grows with it. Okay, makes sense, right? Here's the uncanny valley. As soon as it got to a certain point, it suddenly dramatically dropped down to untrust again. So when the human went from it looks pretty realistic to it looks so realistic, but it's not quite. It suddenly drops and our trust goes inverted and we actually distrust it again until it looks exactly like it, and then it reverses back and goes back up. Actually, let me just show you a I'm going to show you the chart because it's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So here is the uncanny value. It's also interesting. It's broken in between. The dotted line is if the subject is moving or if it's just still. So you can see the affinity or the trust or whatever, positive or negative, in human likeness. So as it goes to the right, that's it looking more and more human. And then it up and down is how much we trust it or like it. So let's just follow the moving one. So if you're looking at a face that's whatever, not has any human likeness, there's no affinity to it. You can see it steadily grows until it's about 70-ish% of human likeness. And you can see like a humanoid robot, right? Like lives right here. This is like Tesla's bot that it's building. And there's a purpose, by the way, that they want it to look robotic and not like a human. There's a few robotics out there that are trying to make it look more human, and they are playing in this valley right here. So there's gonna be a lot of resistance to actually putting those in your house. But anyway, let's keep looking at this. So then as it grows, then it suddenly goes all the way down to 0. And they have an example here, like of a zombie or whatever. This is really interesting. They're comparing a prosthetic hand, but when it's moving versus when it's just sitting there. And you can see how that difference is when it's moving. And think about this in your own psychology. If you see a prosthetic hand and it looks pretty real but not quite, there is absolutely this like weird hesitation of like, oh my gosh, something's off there, right? I don't trust that fully. Anyway, until it finally goes up to a healthy person. So this is the uncanny valley. Super interesting. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because as GPT and its response is becoming more human, we are suffering right now in an uncanny valley where its failures, even though they're much better than what it was 10 years ago, we're distrusting it more today than we did 10 years ago. The reason is because it's getting so close to actually having human output. So our body is programmed to like put out flares of like, hey, don't trust this, something's off, right? It looks like a fruit, but it's actually poison. You know, the frog that's red looks like a strawberry, but it's like it's not quite. So maybe I shouldn't eat that thing because it's actually poisonous. Okay, that uncanny valley is where we're at right now with AI and integrating it into our work and seeing output that's done by AI. We are at this weird quasi distrust that's worse than it was 10 years ago.
That makes sense. That's a cool chart. I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, so it's so interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's something that we're going to see overcome, I think, here in the next few years as we just sort of overcome that, get over it, or we at least recognize it and we determine to like, hey, let's leave our GPT, let's leave our output at before that valley, right? Let's make sure it looks like a robot. Let's have Tesla's robot look metallic and stuff like that. So there's no like, signals in your head that are saying don't trust this thing. I think we'll start to learn how to grapple with that. How do we implement AI in a way that that we know it's AI, and we're not trying to pass it as human, right? Because it's not quite yet, and people are going to distrust you much more if you try to do that.
Yeah, Fletcher. It's the first time I heard "uncanny valley" was digital artists just talking about CGI in movies.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, this is a little
Yep.
like. You're like, this is not quite a human. You can tell it's a little off. But that conversation has literally always been within fiction, right? Within movie making. And now it's like, oh, great. We have to figure out this stuff for ourselves in real life.
Yep. No, it's so true. Actually, it's funny. I know. Anyway, it's interesting too. Our own ability to differentiate between the two is growing quickly too. I know the first time I watched the Polar Express, I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. It looks so real. I watched it this last year. I'm like, this is so scary. Like these quasi puppet people, kind of looks like Tom Hanks, but it's like a nightmare of them. And so our ability to actually distinguish, we're actually like we're able to close that gap a little bit more, where we can really even see the things that are even higher on the, starting to get to look more like it as it curved back up, are actually dropping down because our ability to detect the slight nuances are getting better. We're training our brain. Our brain's like, warning, warning, the world is looking more human, but it's not. I need you to pay attention to the minute details that actually make something trustworthy versus, failing.
Wow. Yeah.
Cool. So another issue is the complexity of how. So they call this the black box, basically. But the complexity of what GPT or what these things are doing to make the decisions and giving you an answer. You sort of put in your request and it gives you the output. Okay. I had one of the best math teachers in the world when I was in 6th grade, and I was very good and still am very good at math, and I love it. And she would give us these homework assignments, and I'd do them gladly. I'm one of those kids. And I'd come back, and I know the first week or two I was in her class, I'd fail these math quests because I would put just the answer in. I really like tidy things. I'm a minimalist at heart. So even if I had to do my work, I'd do it on a scrap piece of paper, and I'd just write the answer on the paper that I'm going to give back to her. Okay. And she'd count that against me. I forgot how she graded it. It was like 3 points for every problem, 2 points if you show your work, 1 point if you got the answer right. That's how she did it. She's a genius. And I think this is such a good example of where GPT needs to go. Right now, it's getting a failing grade because it's giving you a good or right answer, but it's not showing its work, actually. It's not showing how it's determining the path or how it's determining that output. So the black box needs to kind of be undone. And basically, we need to understand how it's making its decisions. And this is called explainable AI. And 58% of businesses see AI explainability as a key adoption factor as well. So explainable AI is kind of a current term, and it's getting the black box out. It's let's show your work. You're going to get docked 2 points for not showing your work and 1 point if you do, because then you can go in, you can reach in to its reasoning, and you can show where it got off. or you can at least understand how it got there, and you can agree with its reasoning of how it got there. Trust is formed after many years of someone doing that for you. They explain the reasoning, and then you're like, you know what, you don't need to show your work anymore. I trust you. That's like years and years and years, maybe 15 years of a relationship before you'll just trust one thing they say without asking them about it. And so yeah, explainable AI is something that we are also, so with jump boards, we're actually trying to come in. We're trying to have explainable AI in a sense. We're basically, as you work through, we can get into it later, but basically we're trying to make it and break down its output into smaller portions so that you can know where maybe it got wrong, or what output it had that you want to tweak way up, before it gave you its final answer, and make adjustments so that that final deliverable or the final project is a good output, because you could see how it was working through it. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, that's another phrase that is new to me. Hmm. But very much,
So
very much like in I share a very similar sentiment. I mean, I think a lot of like the success that we've seen as a team working with clients is because we have always pulled back the curtain and said, here's how we made our decisions, right? I thought it was this, but it was that. Like we're telling a story a little bit along the way and being able to go and be like, nope, that's wrong.
yep,
Yeah,
let's make a
that's
tweak there and then keep going.
exactly. Yeah. So
Yep.
to be, I don't even know that I knew that was an option with AI because it feels so black box,
Yep.
I see how we're doing it, but I didn't, yeah. It'd be cool to dive into that world a little bit more, see how you actually make it open up.
Exactly.
Making, yeah.
And there's kind of a tension there, because people are used to working with Apple devices where it just gives you the output you were looking for, right? So it's weird though. We have this new kind of inherent trust thing, because it's not just giving you a regurgitated programmatic output. It's doing something organically. It's giving you an output based on its LLM, or GPT. And so there's this new introduction of trust that we haven't really had before with technology. Or that's actually not entirely true. When computers came on the scene, there's a massive similarity, in my opinion, of when computers first arrived and when AI first arrived. Same fear for job loss, same distrust for its ability to perform the job, or distrust for it to actually put out, errors, because people weren't there. And then sudden adoption, where actually we realize it can enhance our work, take on some of the medial work, and then take it on. It's, in my opinion, history is repeating itself, but just at a grander scale. But yeah, that explainable AI, I think, is a really fascinating problem that AI specifically will need to address, unlike anything else. So the next one is unpredictability, and this one's really interesting, because a it is still a probable outcome of words. You can run the same query 20 times and get different results each time. This is good and it's bad. It makes you question its output, but also it's like, oh, it's always like new, it's always fresh or whatever. But it's just a unique problem that only AI has, because that's never happened before. So with job boards, if you actually put in mobile app design and automate a template, and then do it again, and then do it again, and do it again, each one of those outputs are going to be different. They're going to be similar, have a same essence, but each one are going to be different. Now it's learning from itself as well. Like, as every time anyone across all of our accounts is making and building and generating boards, it is learning from the language that's being put, or you're kind of or even overwritten on those. And so it is definitely like molding and kind of becoming more tuned as people use it. But it's going to change every time. So it's, again, it can be seen as a good thing or a bad thing, and you just have to understand its use case, and then normalize where you need to, or at least give excuses for its variance, and then yeah, make sure people understand that it's going to be, it's like, if you ask someone to make draw a picture of a flower, and they're in 5 different rooms, all 5 of those are going to be different when they come back to you, but they're all going to be flowers, right? It's the same thing. Every time you hit return, it doesn't it it pretends like it's in a different room. It resolves that problem for you, right? Contextually aware of what happened before, but not really output aware, as far as like what it's going to try to solve it again in a new way.
Yeah, it's like recipes, right? Like, I need to make some chocolate chip cookies, and it's like, "Here's a recipe," and it'll make cookies, or it'll be like, "Here's another one, less butter, whatever." It'll still make chocolate chip cookies, and until you're like, "No, this is the one that I like. This is the tried and true batch," like, you know what I
Yep,
mean? Yeah, then it learns this.
exactly.
Yeah, mhm.
Yep. So how do we do that? How do we actually put into our products when it's achieved a desirable outcome that we want to like somehow get more consistency on, but we do want it to be always learning and slowly morph over time. So is it really a variant appetite where you're like, okay, I do want you to vary, but I want it to be incremental, right? We had a gas station at my old house down the road that said, no matter how big gas prices change, we'll never change it more than 2 cents every day. So if it dipped $5, it would take however many days that is to get down to that new number. And that was their way of saying, yes, it varies. And we're not going to like promise it's 350 every day, but we are going to limit the vary every day so you can come knowing there's somewhat consistency. And I think that there'll be some blend of that, with our output, but that needs to be solved. And then another one is this term called ethical AI. So ethical AI, I think is still a new term. I don't fully understand all of what it could mean. In my opinion, because of what I mentioned earlier, the fact that we can't really dictate or clean up the LLM. I mean, we're talking about 91 Empire State Buildings worth of data, and you putting in one more paper that says, "Hey, don't be rude," isn't doesn't do a lot for the overall. Like, this is a genuine reflection of all of our human like consciousness, that it's referencing. So you having an opinion or stomping your foot and like saying you can't read my papers, that's not, it means nothing. Like, that's like not pouring your glass of water into the ocean because you want it to dry up or something. Like, that's just stupid, and it's just you yelling at the wind. However, in my opinion, ethical AI really can come in when we talk about attribution or citing and sources and stuff like that. I think that's where it has an opportunity, where we aren't using it behind the scenes. We're not sort of hiding it as our research assistant and kind of, you know, no one wants to like, I think no one's against that, but there needs to be a better way where AI, we all know we're using it, and we just need a good way where when you're writing notes and stuff like that, you can quickly see the parts that were just purely pasted and brought in through AI, parts that you edited. I mean, look at like Google, when you go into edit mode, right? And you start writing, it shows strikeouts. You have to accept the changes, but there's a documented history of Nicole wrote this, James tweeted this, Fletcher wrote this, Eric deleted this whole thing. There's like a history or paper trail, so the origin of each like line item, right? And so this is really complicated. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but in general, our work, we all are going to be using AI in our work, 1,000% guarantee. And so it is just about how do we have a paper trail of where it was brought in through AI research, and how do we kind of know that, and where did I actually input or override or scratch that out. This is going to help AI understand how to better predict its outcomes, so it has better outcomes in the future. I think it makes you more transparent. It's an ethical way to work where you're showing your work yourself. You're like, yes, this is all my presentation. Here's me. Here's it, without being embarrassed about that. It's a tool we can use, and we need to figure out a way we integrate it into our lives with attribution and citation.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, it's like right now, if we're doing a landscape analysis, like we're going to Google and we're researching companies and we're reading, reports and whatever, right? So it's like it's just one more of those types of resources. It's faster, it's, perhaps better.
Yep.
Maybe a little less biased because SEO dominates everything anyway at this point. You've just got big organizations showing up on the first page anyway. So it's like,
Yep.
but it's just like one of those tools. But I think, if people are lazy and they're just making AI do the work and being like, ta-da, here's the work, that's obviously going to cause a lot of problems and a lot of
Yeah.
distrust. So I think to be someone who works with clients or teams and be like, here's how I used it. Here's why I used it. And here's how I modified it. Even if there's not a technology yet, there is, we're building it to like make that easy to know for you to like get in the habit of using it and taking people along and teaching them. That's going to increase your value. People are going to be like, oh, this person actually understands this technology, and they understand, and they are clearly like demonstrating the human magic that AI doesn't have, which is to like help me understand and like feel like I can confidently like sign off on this thing.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. So yeah, those are some of the issues I think, and we could definitely get into it, but jump boards is specifically um, we already have attribution or citation in there. We're trying to break into that ethical AI thing. Our We're also already working on a variant controller so that it's not as unpredictable. Our complex UI, or the explainable UI, or AI, sorry, is we're trying to fix that also, because when you break down a process into its different steps, you basically are turning each of those into a small knob you can tweak, and we can show you that in detail. Probably in the next one we go into, we'll probably look at how John Boards is solving these issues right now in that world. So I want to end, though we have 4 more minutes. I just want to look at some predictions. My predictions. This is where we'll get to laugh in 2 months at what I'm thinking here. But here's some predictions I think for digital products implementing AI into your product. The first one, and I think I'm the most excited about this one, is templates across every product will disappear. There's no need to have a template library for your digital application, right? Those take hours and hours of work to put together. It's meant to be a way for people to get a head start or jump straight into like, oh yeah, I'm kind of wanting to, in Google Docs, I'm kind of wanting to make an essay, or I'm kind of want to do this. That goes away. Like that kind of formatting of anything will disappear as you're working, or you can tell it what you're looking for. It will create on the spot a current, fresh template, I guess you'd call it, but basically a current, fresh version of what you're looking for. What I love about that is templates. Like I feel like when I say it, I see dust coming out of my mouth. They feel dusty. They were built however many years ago by someone who's not even a designer or whatever, and so you just don't even trust them, honestly. Like maybe they're great when you're in third grade and you're learning how to use the software, but even then, there's a way better way to contextually understand what you're wanting to build, and then create something based on modern today's interface or whatever designs, and actually put together for you a really good zero state of whatever it is you're building. So I think template marketplaces will all disappear because they're just noisy and they really don't help a lot.
Okay, so like what does a company like Canva need to do to stay relevant? Because they're huge. Everyone is using them,
Yep,
but they are templates.
I agree. I think I think AI is going to be Canva for us. We'll say I need to have a social post, whatever, and then it'll give you like 12 options. It'll know what your preference is, because by the way, did you know Google like did away with a lot of their cookie policies, and people thought that's crazy, but the reason is because it knows so much about you without you having to tell it anything or remembering anything. So it knows your preferences. It's going to know what you need. If you paste in whatever, it could probably format it, understand what you're getting at, understand your business and where it's going to play, and then create for you a design that is going to be competitive there. I understand that if you're thinking about Midjourney and how that's going to work there, like these are just stepping stones, but that's absolutely where we're going, where it's going to, for you, create something fresh and new on the spot.
Yep.
Yeah, Canva's in trouble, in my opinion. Okay, another one is there is no need for any use case dead ends or 404 pages. So intent to search or intent to find something is baked into your trail that you went from, and there's no reason that you should ever land on a 404 page or get an error state of any kind. It should know that edge case. It should be able to look at the code of your site and understand what you're meaning to do, and build a bridge code that basically gets you back in with the proper output. And whereas before it was failed to duplicate, failed to create, failed to whatever, it will know your intent, create custom code that second for you to bridge, basically get across that spark, have that edge case solve itself, and then nothing went wrong in your opinion. So edge cases disappear. Another one, oh, we have 1 minute. Shoot, there's
I'll hang on a little longer, honestly.
Okay. There's some really, really cool ones. Okay. I think there'll be, this is already happening, and so this isn't a big prediction, but there's going to be increasing seamless relationship between, in a company, between engineers, user feedback, or the customer success people, and experience design. Those three things will basically be able to activate their input instantly. There's not almost no need for communication between them, because a designer could make design-based decisions that get put into action, but those could be actually triggered from user feedback. So I just think in general, the current workflow of having to get feedback, design feedback, and then build and deploy will disappear, hopefully, where like basically anyone could make those decisions and make changes, because it can kind of handle that data and then implement it into your product instantly. So that's coming, and I think that's an interesting one that we're seeing, right? Figma
Wow.
already is like putting out code and stuff like that on what it does. I see a world where basically, well, I see a really crazy world where even Figma isn't technically needed, but we'll look at that here in a second.
Yeah. So let me regurgitate that. So a customer has an issue or an idea or something, and you really just need a human to be able to say yes or no, make that happen. Like, I agree with this. This is valuable enough. This is in alignment with our strategy or whatever. And then like it makes the design and the
Yeah, or even more nuance, where it's like, oh, this it's not just a customer, it's like the user reports and the data is showing that there's a lot of like people aren't discovering this feature in your product.
yeah.
So it needs to be repositioned in a way that gets more visibility, or there needs to be some sort of onboarding to get them there. Well, it can see that data, right? The needle in the haystack of data. It can understand it. It could actually solve that problem and even engineer and build it and maybe do A/B testing on it right away, like by itself. And it could say like, oh yeah, this solve did work. Let's change that over.
And report back and say, this is the winner. Do
Yeah.
we adopt it globally? And you're like, yes.
Yeah, or makes that decision itself. But that leads me to the next one, which is, I think, so I'm a UX designer, so I really primarily work in the experience design and UI and UX of application digital products. So UI right now is dictated by my preferences as the UX designer. And I just know after 18 years of doing it what people are used to, the patterns they're used to working with. And so I make sure to employ and use those tools in a way so that Nicole, when the first time she uses my product, she intuitively understands where to set her preferences, where to start her story, how to do XYZ, right? I know, because just doing it so long, you just know the patterns you need to put into place. But they're all put through my preference. So I like minimal, kind of like, get the design out of the way. Let's just get to the end point. That's my preference of design. Happens to be a lot of other people, so it works really well in businesses. But you go to Monday.com, then you go to Asana, and then you go to Jira. Those are going to be actually. I mean, look at Asana versus Jira. Those are incredibly different experiences that categorically do the similar things. Okay, I'm not saying they do the same thing, because they are different, but they do categorically the same thing. But the experience, you have to learn both of their methodology of implementing UI. Okay, so let's look at it at that small area. Did you know that there are only 50-ish common UI patterns that we use? Okay, things like drop-down menus, tabs, accordions, sliders, and modals. There's basically 50 common patterns. If you're creating something new, a snowflake, it's like, oh, I really want to have a whatever, this crazy little wheel that spins out and all your options come into it. I promise that'll die. It'll be cool for maybe a minute. You might get a headline if you're lucky that this is really innovative, but we're going to drop back and revert to these 50 core, common UI patterns that we use. Okay. So if you abstract those common patterns and think about it, every application you use could be distilled into those core 50 patterns, right? And even philosophy of placement and stuff like that could be distilled into different philosophy buckets. You could have an Android way of setting up something and an Apple way of setting up something. So what I'm driving to is the fact that UI will become a personal preference based on the user, no longer the business. So James loves the Android experience. When you go to your banking app, it's going to look like Android developed it and designed it, because it's gonna speak the same design language to you. The menus are going to be in the same place. The way you get your information will be in the same place. All the interactive patterns will be reskinned according to James' preference. Right? We have a really grotesque version of this where you can set the color of your Chrome. Right? So no, look, now all my tabs are blue. But that preference is going to drop into the full experience, and I think it's going to go outside of web browsing. I think it'll become our full OS on your machine. You will have a Nicole way of working with the world. and all your apps will speak your language. Nicole, I know I've been over your shoulder where you were struggling with some like stuff on Slack, like, oh, how do I switch between this? That goes away because you have learned a way to approach technology. It'll understand that and it'll reskin everything to be Nicole's design, basically. Now you could always peek back behind the covers and maybe see what the intended desire is. There's absolutely no reason that we have to go in and actually have the brand preferences override the user's preferences, as long as the user preference is established by some common theme, right? So I think there'll be like more like committees where basically we have these design systems already in play. We have, you know, Apple's and Twitter's, and everyone has like a really good design system. Some of them are extremely well built out, but those are basically going to be the options maybe that you select at the top, and then those will cascade into every experience across the web or even on your computer.
Wow.
That's fascinating.
It is. It's very. It's not like pie in the sky. It just makes sense. Like breaking it down, it's like, no, that's a very possible thing. It's going to produce a better experience for users. Because Nicole, watching you get frustrated with Slack, was like, man, if there was a viable, another option technology, I could see you jumping at that
I was
moment.
so mad I
Yeah.
couldn't change my email.
Yeah, it was so frustrating.
Right, and
I owned the company and I was locked out because
Yeah.
my email changed. Yeah.
So
wouldn't
all
the
that
brand want
frustration goes
that
away.
too? Wouldn't the brand want that type of experience with their users to like want to keep using it? Like,
So
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, because they will see the data that when you just decrease the barrier to entry and the frustrations along your user journeys, they have a better experience. So maybe you're producing some cool thing, or you hold the data of something, but let them decide and subscribe to some preference of UX, and then it'll be skinned across these platforms.
And they would know Nicole's an Enneagram 8, and we got 5 minutes to fix this for her. She's going to burn the whole thing down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the final one I have, I think that I should have saved that one for last, but one of the last ones I have is onboarding in general is a really interesting multi-billion-dollar industry where like having tours of the product, understanding it, doing incremental feature discovery, having a chat bot that leads you through a product, seeing your success rates, and then reaching out with email, reminding them what to use or whatever. There is a huge world known as onboarding. So digital products, you have a methodology of how to use your product, and everyone on your team knows how to use it and loves it. So that's point B. Point A is wherever they're sitting at the moment. And so onboarding is all about getting them from that point A to understanding and using it the way your super users do. Okay. You have full teams dedicated to customer success. You have billions of dollars thrown at like tours and onboarding videos and all this stuff to get that data into there. Again, based on what I just said before, where the UX becomes actually predominantly controlled by the user, in general, the onboarding will become automated with AI. It'll be able to look at however your data is stored. Okay, for example, I worked with a fintech platform, and they would charge multiple millions of dollars just to onboard new, new banks into their system. Okay, so massive amount of effort to get them on all their data migrated over, and then all their preferences worked out, so that they could just even have a seamless, change of who services their banking platform. So that amount of money and that amount of technology that's built just for that onboarding tour, there's a lot of snowflake design that's just built for that zero state. When nothing's there, what should it look like? How do we tell them and educate them? All that will go away because it will be able to look at your data or who you are and bring you into what looks like the software that you've been working in for the last 5 years, right? It'll be able to make that migration if you do have old data and properly format it and bring it into the new flow. It'll be able to even just look if it's a new technology or a new service. This is what we're doing at Jobboards, by the way. When you sign in, basically we're looking at right now it being able to research who you are and fully fill out the company details, and then drop you off at a basically fully built out, as if we did an hour-long Hibachi design system session, and actually show you what that end state looks like. So that I think is going to be a really awesome way. And I think that's something, the reason I put this last is because I think it's something you can work on today. If you do have a digital product, that is a feature that you could, using today's technology, not tomorrow's, you can look at totally making your adoption path much, much shorter and cheaper.
Wow. Fletcher, do you think companies like Zapier will just disappear?
I do inside. Yeah, I have a deeper theory about all that stuff that we probably don't have time to go into. And I think a lot of the iPass technology and a lot of the kind of even APIs and stuff like that. I don't think they'll need to be as structured that we have right now, where basically you need to set up the way this data hits each other and like passes data between it. It could be so much more random, because if you think about it, if you came up to like some connection board as a human and you saw that this cord was blue and there's a blue socket, you'd know to put it in there. You don't need documentation or a book to talk about that. So in the same way, I feel like a lot of the data connection and documentation that we require to actually be able to do feasible APIs and like actually make things work and that data work will go away. It'll be able to make informed decisions and test it as it's going and actually realize, oh, that failed. That shocked me. This didn't. And it should be able to make really complicated, almost unstructured data, just like decisions, and so in a way, you almost get to go from having to have your closet organized so you can find your hat when you open the door, to just having a room where you just toss all your clothes into, and then when you open the door, it just hands you a hat and you put it on. And you don't like it. It can structure it however it wants to, because it knows when a request is made how to get that data to you, no matter where it's stored.
That's a great analogy. I love that.
Fletcher with the analogies, man.
Yeah.
Like, he's got many gifts, but that's definitely like top 3. Amazing. Great. Well, I'm glad we got this recorded, because we will come back in a couple of months and see what's going on. And I just, for anyone who's made it this far at the end of the video, we're building jaunt boards. If you want to check it out, there's a little QR code here. You don't have to invest to explore what we're building, but it'll take you to our WeFunder page so you can learn more. We also have an agency called Jumpsuit, where we're helping companies make these big technical transitions too. So Fletcher is available for consulting as well. So definitely feel free to reach out to Jumpsuit if we can be helpful. Amazing. See you later, Fletcher. Bye, everybody.
Bye.